Thanks, Chair. I found the discussion extremely insightful and very informative so far, and I think it's a very, very topical issue in Ireland about orphan drugs and access to them. I just have a couple of specific questions. One in particular on can the HSE overturn a decision by the NCPE, and if it has happened, where has it happened and which drug has it happened? The second question is the process, in my view, and John has probably alluded to, about the assessment of orphan drugs. I think it's largely flawed. And I particularly, on one drug, is Kuvan. And PKU, for those who are living in PKU. Now, what I have in front of me is Kuvan was approved by the FDA 7 years ago. It was approved by the European regulator in 2009. It's also approved in 20 European countries. And Ireland has one of the highest rates of PKU in the world. And it probably even gets more kind of slightly bizarre is that Kuvan is actually made in Ireland, down in Cork. So they're all the kind of the mitigating circumstances for Kuvan to be approved as a drug for PKU. So if you can give an answer to, I know, John, you said that there will be a meeting in the coming months with the HSE. About Kuvan, I think that's very imperative. Just on the last kind of narrative and this kind of is a kind of perennial issue, is the extortionate amounts of money that pharmaceutical companies are actually asking governments to pay for drugs. It's literally incredible, and they do have countries and patients over a barrel. Now, I don't know if you can comment exactly on this, but it's profiteering at its worst. It's the kind of jungle mentality of capitalism, where companies, huge pharmaceutical companies, and there's a lot in this country, are literally, I would actually say, killing people, going to an extent where they're pricing people out of their health and country out of their wealth, and they have countries over a barrel. So I don't know if you can specifically comment on that. And I know Michael. I've seen Michael a few times on the television, and I have to say I have a huge amount of respect for you, because you've come out and you've said that that pharmaceutical companies have not extortionate, but have used their power over countries where drugs should be available to people. So I don't know if you can comment on that, but them two specific questions, particularly on Kuvan.
Better utilisation there. In terms of the PKU and the timelines, look, there was an assessment in 2009. A decision was made that Kuvan would not be reimbursed at that time. I suppose the fact that we are re-looking at it shows that the HSE is always open to re-looking at it, and it addresses some of the questions that the Senator was asking around Translarna, as in, is the door closed ever? The door is never closed. We will always re-look at a medicine. The door is never closed. Once we say no to the application that we have at the current time, but if new information becomes available, a new assessment process is started, and that's what's happened in the Kuvan. We are due to meet the company. I don't want to get into having newspaper or media how the outcome of the negotiations, but it's in next weeks as opposed to months is when the actual meeting with the company is due. I can't answer the extortionate question because of the simple reason that I have to stand opposite the industry. And if I was to go and say the industry was extortionate, it might be very good for it might be a good way to start a negotiation. I always need to work on the basis that people on the other side of the table are willing to negotiate and are willing to do their best. Personal views on what the pricing is, I think I'll leave them as personal.
Deputy Kenny I might try and clear up some of Deputy Kenny's questions. The one about the overturning decisions by the NCPE, I think the answer is yes to that. It happens from time to time where there are more compelling issues arising aside from just the cost effectiveness one. But Professor Barry might...
Just to go, or can be as a case in point, in terms of just off the top of my head. No. There are multiple. Okay. There are multiple scenarios where that happens, and I think it's important. That's not a criticism of the process that the NCPE does. The NCPE looks at a medicine at a time and point, at a price at that point, and gives advice, and Michael would be always very clear in the media. What he is giving is advice on the basis of the proposition put forward with the company. Is it reasonable use of money at that time? If we can improve the commercial terms, clearly the reality is, as I've said earlier, for almost every medicine, 20, 25%, 30, 35% is how the terms move. That's how the prices move over time. So that's a substantively different question to the one that Michael would have been asked to look at.
That point, and I think the point is from our perspective, we would say that's the way the HSE should be using our recommendations, is to try and get the best value for money they can, and where we would say no initially to the initial price ask, as Sean was saying there, that you can get substantial price reductions, which means of course that the expenditure from the health service on that particular drug is much less, and it's available to do other things. So I think they use our work in a pretty good way many times.
On the Chair's harmonisation queries? Yeah, in terms of harmonisation, I'll leave Michael to talk about harmonisation of the assessment process, but in terms of harmonisation of reimbursement, obviously there is obviously the challenge that different countries have different abilities to pay. That's a statement of fact. But in terms of, we have tried to engage with our colleagues in Europe. For example, in preparation or during even the Orkambi discussions, we met our colleagues in The Hague from the Netherlands. They've only, in terms of could we have got in the room with them and agreed a process, well, we made a decision to say yes in June. They've only been able to say yes now. Our colleagues in the UK have still not said yes. Colleagues in Australia still not said yes. Colleagues in Belgium still not said yes. They have a different view to the one that the HSE took ultimately, and which this state took. So in terms of, it's difficult to get everybody aligned on the same basis. I doubt that we got an offer that they didn't get. I doubt my team is that good, but maybe we are. I doubt it. I would imagine that pharmaceutical companies take a pan-European approach, that at a particular point in time they will offer price X. Maybe in a year's time it's X minus 5%, X minus 10% as price moves on. No, I think what happens is companies tend to go to and this is a personal view, I don't have evidence to supplant this, but I think it would be on reimbursement agencies. Reimbursement agencies internationally would concur that companies tend to go to the countries that pay the highest prices first. In the past, Ireland, there's no doubt, a decade ago we were the first. We know where our prices were a decade ago. Unfortunately, once you start challenging, on the other side of the table, companies are reluctant to make concessions. Over time, they may make a concession in Germany. My guess is that concession then becomes available across Europe because somebody has broken the bar within their own governance structure. Then maybe France does a better deal, maybe Ireland does a better deal. That becomes available to other countries and people trickle into it eventually. Could you do better if you got everybody on side? Maybe, but how do you get everybody to agree? We're all willing, in our budget, our national service plan process, to put aside the amount of money needed to say yes to these 25, 30, whatever it is drugs. We made a decision to say yes in June. They've only been able to say yes now. Our colleagues in the UK have still not said yes. Colleagues in Australia still not said yes. Colleagues in Belgium still not said yes. They have a different view to the one that the HSE took ultimately, and which this state took. So in terms of, it's difficult to get everybody aligned on the same basis. I doubt that we got an offer that they didn't get. I doubt my team is that good, but maybe we are. I doubt it. I would imagine that pharmaceutical companies take a pan-European approach, that at a particular point in time they will offer price X. Maybe in a year's time it's X minus 5%, X minus 10% as price moves on. No, I think what happens is companies tend to go to the, and this is a personal view, I don't have evidence to supplant this, but I think it would be on reimbursement agencies internationally would concur that companies tend to go to the countries that pay the highest prices first. In the past, Ireland, there's no doubt, a decade ago we were the first. We know where our prices were a decade ago. Unfortunately, once you start challenging, on the other side of the table, companies are reluctant to make concessions. Over time, they may make a concession in Germany. My guess is that concession then becomes available across Europe because somebody has broken the bar within their own governance structure. Then maybe France does a better deal, maybe Ireland does a better deal. That becomes available to other countries and people trickle into it eventually. Could you do better if you got everybody on side? Maybe, but how do you get everybody to agree? We're all willing, in our budget, our national service plan process, to put aside the amount of money needed to say yes to these 25, 30, whatever it is, drugs. And in terms of, I suppose the one point I would make to the criticisms of our process, there are 45 new medicines that come through the EMA every year. Some of those medicines have multiple indications. The list we're getting here today is 4 or 5 medicines. Okay, you're not getting 40 medicines to coming in your representations. It's my understanding because I've not seen the PKUs come first. So yes, we're having challenges. Yes, we have facing funding difficulties. But historically, we've been very good. Over the last few years, we've struggled. We've probably struggled. I suppose as a country, we've probably come out of the biggest economic depression that we were in decades. We managed to keep the process going through that from the significant savings we made with reference pricing and generic substitutions. But there is no doubt that in the last couple of years there has been a step change in terms of the number of medicines coming to us. And you could give me a couple of $100 million today, and I still wouldn't be able to clear every medicine over the next 5 years. We still wouldn't be able to clear every medicine. That's the reality. That's the volume.
Sure. Just to finish on a couple of the points raised, and by the way, Professor Barry might wish to comment a bit more on the changes that are happening in the pharmaceutical world that are moving now away from the high volume products towards rarer products and higher prices, which does seem to be a significant pattern, and perhaps explains why we're back with the committee for the second time this year, and that I think signifies in its own way the importance of this issue as an emerging issue for so many people. Just to finish on Deputy Kenny's point there, it doesn't appear that the product being made in Ireland gives us any entitlement to a better pricing, by the way, but maybe that should be something that's worth considering a bit further.